Hello and welcome to another Sporties webinar. Thanks for joining us today for What's New in ForeFlight. We're excited to have you with us for an action-packed and information-packed hour. We're going to share a lot of information about ForeFlight, what's new, some advanced tips, hopefully give you some information that you didn't know walking in here today. With that, we're going to get started. We're really pleased to have with us today Josh Berman from ForeFlight. Josh is a longtime employee at ForeFlight, has been with the company for many, many years and is an absolute pro, somebody I turn to anytime I have a really hard question. So we are thrilled to have him with us to teach us some advanced things on ForeFlight. So Josh, take it away.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate the intro and the opportunity to be here today. Got some neat topics lined up. We're going to review some popular questions that we were asked in the booth at AirVenture this year, take a look at different approaches for building flights for different types of flights, and then a closer look at some pre-flight, in-flight, and post-flight tips and tricks that I think make using ForeFlight a real joy. And then we've saved some time for a live Q&A at the end, and assuming the technology holds up, we'll even have a live iPad on that, so fingers crossed. First thing I wanted to get into was quick filters. This is something that we introduced a while back with the aeronautical layer, and we find that pilots don't always know what all the buttons mean. So I wanted to take a few minutes here and show what they are. It's the column of buttons along the left-hand side of the maps page there. And you can turn those on and off by hitting the maps settings button and then toggling the quick filter on and off. And the quick filters let you quickly enhance the information or declutter it on the maps page. So for example, if you tap the middle button there, that'll turn off airways. And towards the bottom of that column, if you tap the terrain, the mountain button, that'll hide the terrain. And if you tap the roads button, that'll toggle roads on and off. So those are really useful if you're looking in a particularly complicated area on the map. You can declutter everything and have it be a little bit cleaner view. These are also accessible on, although some smaller screen iPhones, there's the aspect ratio just doesn't work to have them appear, and so you may not see them at all. But all of the settings that those toggles control can also be accessed through the map settings button in each different category. So in this case, we've got the airspace showing, and you can see the show and hide button up at the very top on the right there lets you do the same thing as the quick toggle does, or the quick filter does on the main screen. Another area that we spoke to a lot of pilots about in the booth was customizing the display to really fit the way that you want to use the app. You can change the instruments that are displayed across the bottom of the screen, and the instruments are selected with the button at the top. That's the blue speedometer. When you tap that, it toggles on and off. And you can change between the instruments that you're displaying by tapping any one of them across the bottom. And then you can scroll up and down in that list and choose the one that you want. Now, a little pro tip for folks who are flying with an iPad: if you've got a couple instruments that you like to have but don't like them enough to be on the main screen, what you can do is rotate the iPad into landscape mode, and you gain a couple additional instruments that show up on the side. So you can tap those instruments in there, and when you need them, just rotate the iPad to landscape. They'll be right there, and then when you're done with them, you rotate it back to portrait, and that'll get them out of the way and keep your view nice and uncluttered. Along the line of customization, you can also change the order of the tabs across the bottom of the page. So if there's a category that you use a lot that you'd like to always be there, or there's one that you don't use very much that you just assume not have, you can get rid of it or set it up the way you want to. And you do that by tapping on More in the lower right-hand corner, and then tapping on the Edit Tab Order at the top. And once you do that, it gives you the kind of hamburger button, the three stacked lines, and you can hold on one of those and drag it up and down to reposition the particular tab. And once you've got the tab in the position that you want it, hit save, and you'll see that that's reflected down at the bottom pretty much right away. So it's a really nice way to set things up. Now, just like the instruments across the bottom, the tab settings here do not synchronize between your devices. So if you're flying with multiple devices or you're using different devices in different places and you make a change in one and you want it to be on the other one, you will have to go through and make that change on each of the devices there. But this gives you the flexibility to customize each one the way you want it to be. If you are making a lot of changes and you realize, oh man, I want to go back to square one, you can easily reset it back to the default order. You just tap the edit and then tap reset to your default order there and hit save, and that'll take you right back to kind of factory fresh. So don't worry about making a change. If you get it wrong, you can easily go back to how it begins. We had a lot of conversations with pilots in the booth at AirVenture about the new downloads view. A couple versions ago, that updated to group the data types and regions together and really tried to clean up and streamline how the downloads are displayed. So now there's two buttons at the top of the downloads view, a data type selection button and a region selection. So if you tap on data settings, you've got the different types that of data that you can choose, the charts and terrain and so forth. So you go into this page and you toggle on the items that you want to have downloaded. Then you tap the back button in the upper left to go back and choose the regions. And in here you can go to each of the regions that are included in your subscription and select the state or province or country to download that data for. And like what we spoke with before, those settings don't synchronize between your devices. So you do need to do those on each device. A pretty big change that we worked on for quite a while to bring to the app is the enhanced weight and balance. And the way to think about this is weight and balance is now associated with the aircraft profile that you would view in the More Aircraft menu. If you don't see it like this, it's still a toggleable switch. You can change it in More account by tapping on ForeFlight Labs and then flip the switch next to Enhanced Weight and Balance. So if you're following along and you haven't tried it out yet and you want to do that, again, it's More in the lower right-hand corner, and then Account. And if you're on a phone, you may have to scroll down a little bit in the menu for Account to show up. And then ForeFlight Labs and just toggle Enhanced Weight and Balance on. With Enhanced Weight and Balance, we've also brought out a lot of different templates. We've got more than 330 different types so far, with more being added periodically. And in this case here for the Bonanza, if you once you select the type, you can see that for types where we've created a profile, the W&B template available shows up in blue. If your aircraft is one that doesn't have a template yet, don't worry, it's not too hard to create your own. We've got a full webinar that goes into all the details about creating profiles from scratch and also migrating your profile from the old weight and balance scheme. And you can watch that directly at foreflight.com/WB-webinar, or you can go to the webinar page on our website to pull that up. Just look for ForeFlight's Enhanced and Integrated Weight and Balance from March, and that'll go into all the details there. Once you've picked the type that has a profile, you scroll down on the aircraft profile page and tap the green Add Weight and Balance. It'll bring up the various different templates that we offer. So in this case, for the Bonanza, there's 3 different templates available, plus the blank template. So if your aircraft doesn't have a template yet, you'll just be starting with the blank template, or you'd be migrating your previous profile. Once you get into creating a profile, here I picked the 6-seat club arrangement. You just enter the information in the orange fields, After that's done, scroll down, make sure everything looks good, and at that point, you're ready to go. You can still do weight and balance calculations in kind of a standalone way on the weight and balance page, and you get to that through more weight and balance, or if you've reorganized your tabs, you can just tap the weight and balance across the bottom. And once you're in here, you can enter and change the loads to fit the flight that you're going to go do. A neat thing that not very many people know about is you can actually pan and pinch zoom the CG envelope graph. You will get an alert if your if your load takes you out of CG envelope, but this is a nice way to see the details, especially if you've got a plane with a wide envelope and you're not really sure where it's at. Part of the enhanced weight and balance that a lot of pilots have been really excited about is the integration with the flights page. And if you've got Performance Plus or a business performance plan, you've got access to this. And what this does is tie a weight and balance calculation to each flight that you've created. So in this case, we've got one from Beaumont to Wiley Post. If you scroll down on this page, you see we've got just one person with kind of a standard weight there, and we've got the fuel policy set as minimum fuel required. If we tap the weight and balance, that'll open up the weight and balance for this particular flight, and we can start entering in the pilot, cargo, other items, and so forth that we're going to be putting into the plane. The fuel policy that you set on the flights page comes in here, but if you go and change the fuel load here, it automatically is synchronized with the flight itself. So it's all tied together automatically. And for me, personally, this is one of the things I really appreciate most about Performance Plus is how it's just all tied together, and it makes it super easy to make sure that the flight I'm contemplating is within envelope. If you come back out to the main page of the flight, you'll see the people and the cargo that you've entered are summarized in the payload category, and you can go ahead and tap the triangular toggle next to each one of those to see the full details. For both the for every plan level, Basic Plus, Pro Plus, Performance Plus, you name it, you can tap the summary button in the upper right of a weight and balance view to generate a summary that shows all the details of the flight. And you can tap the Send To button to export that via iOS, to print it, to email it, and if you've got a Performance Plus plan, you can save it to the flight's files. So that document would be associated with the flight, and you would have that in the future if you keep the flight in the app. Something new that we've introduced recently is the ability to manage documents on the web. For quite a while, we've had an option for Pro Plus and Performance Plus to link a cloud document drive, like a Dropbox or a Box or an Amazon S3 to your ForeFlight account. Now this feature is available for, using the documents on the web is available for every plan level. And what this lets you do, if you log into plan.foreflight.com and click on your documents, you can actually see the documents that you've loaded, and you can view them, organize them, upload them, delete them, kind of do all that management of the imported drive there. So walk through an example here. You can click the button to import, or you can just drag a file in from your Finder or file manager. In this case, I'm dragging a PDF in from my computer. Give it a couple of seconds to upload. Your mileage may vary depending on the speed of your internet connection. And then once that is uploaded, you'll see that it shows both in the imported view on ForeFlight on the web, and if you open it up on your iPad, you'll see, and go to the imported drive, you'll see the document there. The really cool thing too is you can view it on the web as well. So if you're at an FBO somewhere and you want to pull up a document that you know you've saved, you can log into your account and boom, it's right there. And that can be really handy if there's something you want to print out on a printer We all know that the printing is sometimes leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of utility. So this lets you easily print out a document that you want to see. Once you've got the document in or open on the web view, if you click on the binder icon in the upper right, you can actually specify one of your existing binders. And if you tap on that or click on that, that will put the document that you imported into that binder, and that change is then synchronized to all of your devices. We had a lot of pilots show up in the booth really excited about the daily weather feature, but a lot of pilots didn't know about it as well. And so walk through this video here. Daily weather is an aviation focused 10-day forecast. And it shows that forecast broken down into an hourly segment with a color band across the bottom showing the kind of forecasted condition, VFR, marginal VFR, IFR, and marginal IFR, or low IFR, sorry. So this is something that I find myself using almost every day, even not in an aviation context, especially with ForeFlight on the iPhone, because if you've got your app accessible, the icon accessible, if you touch hold on the icon, it'll bring up the little contextual menu, and you can choose local forecast there, and that will give you a forecast for your exact location right where you are. So you don't have to be at an airport, you don't have to select a city, you just touch hold on the icon and click the tap local forecast, and then you'll see where you're looking. I use this a lot, both for, hey, what do I need to think about for going out of the house, as well as longer term planning for flights. You know, if I'm looking to take a flight in a week, this is a pretty good way to get a sense for, is the weather likely to be good, or is the weather likely to be challenging for that flight? One of the things pilots asked us was, hey, what's the best way to plan a flight? And the great thing about the app is there really isn't just one best way. You can use a couple of different approaches to planning your flight, and that can depend on the type of flight that you're going to make or the type of device that you're using. So in this one, I'm going to show a VFR example. And one of the things about VFR is, you know, you're likely going to be looking down, not just out the front of the plane. And so you may want to select a route that lets you fly near a friend's house or near a particular landmark, or you want to avoid certain areas since you're flying VFR. So in this case, starting from the maps page is really powerful because you can easily add points, or you can rubber band your route. So in this case, we'll rubber band the route here by touch holding on the route line, and well, I'm not quite doing that. You can tap on the elements of the map to see airspace and other things that you may want to avoid. In this case, we've got the restricted area there, and also then a different restricted area that we want to pay attention to. So if we rubber band the route out, we'll stay away from the class Bravo down by Orlando, and with the altitude that we select, we should be good to go around the airspace as well. With Pro Plus and Performance Plus, you can add the profile into your planning process, and I find this to be really useful, especially if I'm flying into a place I'm not as familiar with, because it gives you the vertical aspect of airspace and also obstacles and terrain. So in this case, once you've got the plan built on the maps page, you can tap the send to button to send it over to flights. And from there, you would be able to file the flight plan if you wanted, or generate a weather briefing, look at a more detailed nav log. All of that would be possible on the flights page. Personally, I find if I'm making a longer flight, I'm probably going to start the planning directly on the flights page, because in that case, I may not be looking at the sightseeing aspect of the flight so much as what's going to be the most efficient way to get there, both in terms of ATC and just flying the plane overall. So if you start on the flights page and tap the plus button, in this case, I'm showing both the iPad and the iPhone view to show that it's pretty similar between the two. Changes you make to a flight will synchronize so that you can see them on your other device, but it won't be quite as live as these examples show. So don't expect the scrolling and everything to be synced like they are here. So you just tap in the departure and destination to enter the route that you're going to fly. In this case, we're thinking St. Louis over to restock over at Sporty's, pick up a few of the latest items there. And that just shows the basic direct to route. You can then scroll down a little bit and tap on route and see the route advisor. This will show you routes that ATC has cleared, and you can scroll down and also get the airway only route if that's what you're interested in. Once you tap the route, it loads it in, and then the time and fuel and everything in your route will reflect, or in the flight will reflect the route that you have selected. With Performance Plus, then, as we talked about before with the weight and balance, you can scroll down here, add a weight and balance, and adjust the fuel based on the fuel policy for your flight. If you scroll up to the top, then you can see the buttons that let you generate a nav log and also request a briefing. Whenever you file a flight plan, this is where you would do the flight plan filing, by the way. Whenever you file a flight plan, a briefing is generated. But if you want a briefing without filing a flight plan, this is where you do it. And we occasionally get questions emailed in to team@foreflight.com, the pilot support team, asking, hey, do you keep a copy of the briefing that I get? And the answer is yes. As long as you tap the green briefing button, we log that briefing, and we would be able to give you a copy of that later on if you ever needed to show, hey, I did get a briefing for that flight. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If you want to have that evidence, just make sure you tap the briefing button or that you have filed the flight plan. When you tap the button, it'll start retrieving the briefing. And when it comes up, you'll be able to step through each page of it. In the upper left-hand corner there, you see the stacked line. If you tapped on that, it would give you the different categories of the briefing, or so you could step through or jump it to exactly the category you want to, or down at the bottom, just tap the synopsis or the next section, and it will automatically progress along. So in this case, we've got the current METARs along the route. You've got nice color coding letting you know is it VFR or marginal VFR, et cetera. Pretty good day to go visit Sporty's today. And next one takes us to the vertical cross-section chart. This gives you a picture of what the winds look like along your route. And if you were flying a jet, something higher on up, you would see the tropopause is shown there as well. That's something that I'm not a jet pilot right now, so it doesn't mean a lot to me, but the jet pilots who use this tell us they appreciate that. Once you're done with the planning, you can tap the Send To button at the top right and send the route to the maps. And that then will show the route that you've planned out. Now, we do sometimes get questions about, well, what if we plan the route on flights and send it to the map, and then I see some weather I want to steer around or something, and I make a change here? Does it tie back to the map automatically? Right now, that doesn't. So if you do make a change here that you want to have incorporated into a flight, you would have to repeat the Send To button, the square with the up pointing arrow, and send that back to the map. I'm sorry, send that from the map back to flights, and that would actually create a new flight. Now, if you're doing a lot of sort of what if planning, that can lead to creating a lot of different flights. So a lot of people will spend time kind of pruning the flights that they've created once they've, along the way, once they've settled on the final flight that they're going to take. There's really no one right way to do it, whatever fits your method of planning. About the only thing I would say is if you're planning on an iPhone, that's really well suited to the touch planning where you're rubber banding the route or you're tapping on an airport. If you're wanting to type in the flight plan menu at the top, it's a little bit harder on the phone just because of the more limited screen real estate. It can certainly be done, but a lot of times I'll just do the touch planning on the phone and then leave the detailed typing planning to the iPad. Speaking of planning on the maps page, I wanted to highlight a feature that's in Performance Plus that not every pilot who came into the booth with the performance plans knew about, and that is you can put icing, turbulence, and cloud forecasts into the profile view. And when you combine that with the radar view on the map page, it can make for really powerful tools to understand the weather aspect of the flight that you're going to make. So this is one I picked here from Milwaukee up to International Falls. And you can see we've got some rain on the maps page, but if you go on the profile view there and you tap the airspace or the button in the lower corner of the profile view, you can activate the icing, the turbulence, and the cloud layers. And you can actually have all three of those at the same time. Kind of lucked out on this example that they are not overlapping very much, so you can pretty distinctly see each of them. But I've seen a lot of flights where if you've got clouds, you've got icing, and you've got or icing potential, and you've got turbulence possibilities. So you may want to toggle between them there, but turning all of those on gives you a really complete picture both of the precipitation and the other forecasted weather along the route. You may have noticed that the little MOA down there is lit up red, and I'll be talking about that more in a few slides, but that's part of our global NOTAMs layer on the map. And now if you tap on that, it will show you, is the area hot? And in this case, the Volk East is hot, so that's a consideration that we would want to avoid that for the route. To do that, you could do, or you can also tap on an airspace in the profile view at the top of the screen, and that will zoom the map to that area and highlight it in green. So it's a pretty helpful way to see where the airspace is and how is it going to impact the route that you're planning. In this case, I worked on rubber banding the route around. So as you touch hold on the route and drag it over, you can then tap on a point. In this case, it's showing the point nearby COSI. When you tap on that in the list, then that adds it to the route, and you'll see that's now included up in the profile view. A subtle but really important point about the forecasted weather that shows in the profile there, the app is automatically blending between different forecast times if your forecasted departure time crosses over. Like the cloud forecast and the icing and the turbulence, those all are issued at certain times for particular durations. And by looking at it at the profile view, we automatically combine those durations to really show what the forecast is going to be at that point along your route at the corresponding time into your flight. So it's pretty neat to see that play out when you're doing the pre-flight planning. In this case, we've got an altitude that is maybe a little undesirable with respect to icing and clouds. So if you touch hold, you could go back to the edit tab to adjust your altitude. If you touch hold on the altitude on the left side and drag that down, you can actually adjust the altitude for your route. And when you release, then it will update, and now your flight is at 8,000 instead of the 12 that we proposed initially. And in this case, I was looking at it and thought, you know what, I don't want to intentionally plan to go right through that line of storm, so let's readjust and go around the south side, and that gives you maybe a better overall option. Speaking of profile, one of the things that came out recently for both Pro Plus and Performance plans is the ability to adjust the per leg altitude and see it in the profile. And this is a really helpful tool if you're trying to figure out the altitude you want to go at to avoid terrain or airspace or weather along your route. So the way to do this is when you start off with the route, you hit the profile button at the right side of the flight plan window at the top of the screen, and that'll show you the obstacles, airspace, and terrain along your route. And then to be able to adjust the altitude, you have to have a waypoint in the route, and that can be a waypoint from other planning that you've done, like if you exported or sent the route from the flights page over to the maps page, or you can add a point in manually. So if we rubber band the route here, if we hold the magenta line, so you get the little focus circle around it, and then let go, and then tap the lat long, that'll add that point into the route. Then all you need to do is tap that point name at the bottom of the flight plan view there, and it'll bring up the option to set the altitude, speed, or time for a delay along your route there. So in this case, we're just going to do an altitude change, and you can make that change be a starting at or a crossing at. So in this case, I think we want to do it as a crossing at. So you just type in the altitude that you want to cross that point at, and then the route will adjust automatically. Now, it doesn't currently show a top of climb or top of descent for that change, but this lets you know that you're going to be needing to descend down to 1500 by that point as you're coming towards that on the route line. The Hazard Advisor Altitude Preview is a feature that's also in Pro Plus and above, and this is a feature that we were really excited to bring out not too long ago. It adds really the third dimension to your flight planning while you're on the ground. Before we had this improvement, you could see Hazard Advisor when you were in the air, but it didn't really give you a good sense on the ground of, well, what does this terrain and what do these obstacles mean to me on this flight? So got a little video here showing how that works. When you turn the Hazard Advisor on, there's a slider on the right side of the screen that lets you adjust the altitude that your route would be at. So you can see here, if we go down 6,500 doesn't give us a lot of options, but 8,500 gives us some options for navigating in between some of the terrain here. And the color of the terrain depends on the setting that you've selected. The default is yellow is you're within 1,000 feet, and red you're within 100 feet, but we have several other options available. Some of them geared a little bit more towards helicopter pilots who are often flying a little bit more closely to terrain. And whenever if you wanted to change that, you would just tap the gear icon in the hazard menu across the bottom there, and that would let you adjust how those colors appear. I mentioned the global graphical NOTAMs before. This is something that our customers around the world have been pretty excited to see added, and even flying in the US here, I see really a lot of utility coming from those. This lets you see if an airspace has been NOTAM'd hot, like in this case, the Buckeye MOA. If you tap on that, it shows that it's active, and also the extent, in this case, 5,000 up to flight level 180, and the duration that that's going to be active. We highlight that, or we color those NOTAMs based on kind of the severity and the type. So if it's an airspace NOTAM, it's going to be red. If it's something that's scheduled, it's coming up, then it's going to be kind of the yellowy color. And then you've probably seen a lot of these gray circles for unmanned aircraft operation, UAS, or parachute jumping. And then we've also got obstacles with the little tower icon there. If there's multiple obstacles that are covered by one NOTAM, then those would be with the gray type. In this case, if you zoom in near that Buckeye, you can see we've got a UAS NOTAM, and seeing it on the screen is just so much more intuitive to what does this NOTAM mean to me. In the past, that NOTAM would have just been in a briefing that went through that area, and you'd have to kind of scratch your head and think, okay, well, really, is that relevant? Now you see it really clearly right on the map. Depending on where you fly, though, there may be more NOTAMs than you really want to see, or it may just be so cluttered that it's not really useful. So if you go to the Maps Settings button, that gear, and scroll down to the Map Overlays and choose NOTAM Settings, you can go in and pick the types of NOTAMs that are showing: exercises, controlled airspace, obstacles, and others. So if you've got a whole bunch of obstacle NOTAMs near you and you're not worried about those, you can toggle those off, and it'll clear up the display quite a bit. This next one is something that this is one of my favorite features. I didn't have much, well, anything to do with it getting into the app, but I think it's a really cool melding of app and device features. If you're connected to a compatible ADS-B receiver, you know, Sentry, Sentry Plus, Garmin GTX 345, any receiver that ForeFlight knows and can work with, if you hear a call sign or tail number and you want to know where they are, you can type that in to the search box on the maps page. And if your device has received that traffic target's data, it will be in the list and you'll be able to see it. So this is an actual example from when I was flying the other day. I heard the controllers say 891 and I didn't know where they were, and I thought, I wonder where they are. So you just tap in the search box at the top and type in whatever it was that you heard of the call sign or the tail number, and then that will show in the list. In this case, we had two call signs that were similar, or that included 891. The one that I had heard was Delta. So when you tap that, then it will immediately jump on the map page and highlight that target. One little trick to this: if you've got hide distant traffic turned on, then if the target is outside of your puck, the plus or minus 3,500 feet and 15 nautical miles laterally, it won't show. So if you tap the target in the search list and it doesn't show up on the maps page, just go to map settings, turn off hide distant traffic, and then redo the search, and it will show you the target here. So I like this. It's kind of cool to listen on longer flights to other traffic and see where they are. And you know, if you're hearing somebody with a ride report, you can tap it in here and see if they're close enough to you that that your device has received their traffic target, and know if their report is relevant. Once you're done with your flight, taking a look at a track log is a really powerful way of evaluating how the flight went. You know, were you on speed? Were you on altitude? Did you fly with the precision that you wanted to fly? And if you're, depending on the device that recorded the track log, you'll have different levels of information available. So if you're flying with a device that has AHRS, you know, the GTX 345 has that, the Sentry and the Sentry Plus do, any number of devices that have the that have the AHRS, your track log will have pitch and roll data. If you're so fortunate as to be flying with the newly released Sentry Plus, your track logs will actually have G-load data. But even if you're just recording a track log with your iPad or your iPhone, it's still going to have your position and speed and altitude data in it. Track logs, you can find them in the More menu in the lower right, and then track log, unless you already reorganized your bottom tab with the edit tab order to show track logs all the time. But when you go to track logs here, on the left-hand side, you'll see a list of all of the track logs that have been recorded in ForeFlight or imported into. And a neat thing about track logs is if you're flying with multiple devices, the track logs that you record on one device will be available on the other device once your device is synchronized to the internet. So you have to land, turn your device, get your device connected to the internet. But once you do that, a track log that you recorded on one device will be available on the other device. Within the track log, if you tap the selector in the lower left corner there, you can choose between the different attributes that are recorded. Like I mentioned before, every track log is going to have altitude and speed. If it was recorded by a device that records that has an AHRS, it's going to show pitch and bank, and then the Sentry Plus is going to give you the G-load option as well. And if you pinch and zoom in on the track log, you'll be able to see a more detailed area. In this case, we're looking as we're coming in to landing at the pitch and bank as you were getting lined up on final there. With performance plans, there's a third dimension, if you will, to track log review, and that is the 3D review. If you tap the 3D button, that will take you to a review of the track log. You do have to be online for this to work in order for it to show the imagery, the aerial view of the satellite imagery there. But when you are online, you can hit play and play through it. You can manually pan the track log around. You can see the obstacles, the towers going by there, and something else that we added recently is you can actually tap on those airport icons to see details about the icons. And you can, this one's doing automatic playing, but you can also manually scrub along the slider there to get to the point of interest in your track log. If you're flying with a Sentry Plus, the Sentry Plus has a neat feature, kind of like the Stratus 2, 2S, and 3, that it can record a track log even when it's not connected to ForeFlight. So if you do that and you've got a track log that was recorded by a Sentry, when you connect to the Sentry Plus, you can pull it up and tap the download button next to the track log, and you can see here for this flight from Fort Worth was a little over an hour long, and it downloads to the device in under 10 seconds. So it's a nice way if you forget to activate ForeFlight for some reason, but you had Sentry on, you know you've got the track log recorded at the end of the flight. So that was kind of a quick run through what we've seen. We'll kick it over to Q&A here with a couple of links to talk about. First, the iPad Pilot News is a great way to stay up to date on everything that is happening with using iPads as a pilot, iPadPilotNews.com. You can learn more about the Sentry Plus at sporties.com/Sentry or flywithsentry.com, sporties.com/webinars, and foreflight.com/webinars to register for upcoming webinars and also to see recordings of past webinars. And last but not least, myself and my colleagues on the pilot support team are standing by a team at foreflight.com. We've got a team of really talented folks there that are raring to answer almost any question you come up with. So, and
Fantastic.
John, I think with that, we'll kick it over to Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. That was fantastic. Lots of great info there. I use the app every day, and I still learned at least half a dozen things there. So thanks for sharing your expertise. Got a couple I want to come back to and expand upon. One was just maybe kind of a basic one, but I think overlooked. You were talking about the aeronautical map layer on the maps page. And some people who want to learn more about restricted airspace or an MOA, how do I learn more about that? I can see the magenta rectangle on my map, but how do I learn more? The altitude, the frequency?
Sure. So I'll go ahead and flip over to the iPad here. And in this case, I've got the NOTAM layer selected. So on the right-hand menu there, you see we've got the NOTAMs layer is the toggleable layer on and off. And you can see the MOAs that are NOTAMed active here are going on and off. If we zoom in a little bit, and I'll tap to dismiss that, and then tap the MOA, In this case, we see the detail about the NOTAM, but if you want more underlying information about the MOA itself, if you tap close and then touch hold, then it will show you all of the other information besides the NOTAM. So it's the point if you were wanting to go to that point. And in this case, that's the Beaver MOA. So we can see the details by tapping on the right there, and it highlights it in green. Then it shows us the lower, the upper, and then the hours for that.
That's a great tip. A lot of people I still see struggling to find the sectional and find the information on the side of the sectional, but this is a much easier way. So great tip there.
Yeah, the aeronautical layer can be used with the sectional as well. And so, not to minimize the sectional, it's how I learned to fly as well, but to add the extra layer of information with the NOTAMs, I think it makes it really even more powerful there as well. So, use the NOTAM layer, and then you can toggle the aeronautical layer on and off as well. With the sectional or the IFR chart, you name it.
A lot of interest in the weather feature, which might be my #1 underrated feature. I use this all the time. So #1, maybe just quick review how I want to find the weather for a random place I'm going to. How do I find that? And then a question related was, where does that come from? What's the weather? What's the source of that weather forecast?
Okay. So to pull up an arbitrary point, you just touch hold on the map, and over on the right here where we've got the add to route, you see the WX button. If you tap weather, then it's going to load the weather, and then you can laterally pan along. You can jump ahead, like if you want to see what's Saturday going to look like there, you can jump there. You can select different points and go along like that. This is a product, and I'm 90% sure I'm right. I hope I'm remembering right. It's WDT. It's a IBM company, basically. This is a computer-generated forecast, so it's not a weather. It's not a meteorologist or a forecaster looking at this, but it's a computer-generated forecast that's done all over the globe. So we're looking sort of U.S.-centric here, but if you're thinking of going over to sunny England and you want to know what the forecast is going to look like, there you can tap weather and it'll give you the daily forecast there as well. And shocker, they've got rain forecast in England, so I guess it lives up to the stereotype.
Very good, excellent. Let's talk a little bit about routes, and specifically kind of the difference between maps and flights, the two different tabs there. If I'm making an adjustment on one, does it sync to the other one?
Great question. It doesn't sync right now. So if you have a flight, there we go, pull over here, and we send this flight to the maps page and decide, you know what, I don't want to fly there, I want to drag it over and pick that. If we switch back to the flights, you can see it's still showing MIDG. So it doesn't synchronize directly there. But what you would do in this case, if you decided this is really where I want to fly, once you've made that change, you just tap here, choose flights, and send it back over. And as I mentioned before, it creates a new flight here. So now you've got the two flights in your list. Once you've settled on the flight that you're going to fly, probably want to go through and clean up to get rid of the one that you're not going to fly. And you do that just by swipe deleting. So you swipe from the right to the left. You can either go all the way across, or once you get the delete showing, you tap the delete, and that'll get rid of the one that you're not flying.
Great. You talked a little bit about ADS-B receivers, and you talked about traffic there, and you mentioned the high distance traffic. Could you just review that, the example where I'm flying at 5,000 feet and I really don't care about Delta Airlines at 37,000 feet. So how do I get rid of that?
Right. So when you're connected to an ADS-B receiver, on the maps page, under the maps settings, the gear icon right there, if you scroll down to the bottom, your ADS-B receiver will be listed there, and you can go in and toggle the high distant traffic. I'm not connected to one here, but you can go into settings, more settings, and if you go into the search bar at the top, I'm going to distant, there we go, high distant traffic. So you can toggle that on and off right here. When you've got it on, if you are hiding the distant traffic, there's a little blue box that shows up in the bottom of the screen, just as a reminder that you aren't looking at every piece of traffic out there. For me personally, when I'm in the terminal area, I really want to know about the stuff that's near me. So that's usually where I turn on the high distant traffic. But once I'm up to altitude, especially if I'm going on a longer cross-country flight, I usually turn high distant traffic off because I want to have a little bit broader picture of the traffic around me. And usually I'm flying IFR, so I'm talking to a controller and have a little bit more eyes on my flight. But that's still a useful thing, even if you aren't, to know where all the traffic that is being received or being rebroadcast is in relation to your position.
Thanks. An excellent use of another tip there, the search for a setting in the settings tab. That's another power user tip that I think more people should use. There's lots of options that are can be overwhelming a little bit at first in settings. So just like on your iPad, when in doubt, just search for it.
Yeah, I'll be honest, even working at ForeFlight and using settings every day, if you go to the settings view, get rid of that. There are a lot of settings these days. And so sometimes it's just a little bit easier to hit the filter and zero in exactly on the setting that you want.
Let's talk about track logs a little bit. You were showing off the track log replay, and tell us a little more about what's recorded there. Obviously, if I'm running my phone, I've got my GPS position, but how about pitch and roll data, AHRS data? How about the G meter? So where do those come in? What do I need to record that data?
Sure. So every device that you fly with is going to have the position and altitude. And let me see if I can jump back to that here. All right, so every device is going to have altitude and speed based on the GPS. And if you're using an ADS-B receiver or other device that provides the AHRS input, and the popular ones are obviously the Sentry and the Sentry Plus, the Stratus 2, the 2S, the 3, Garmin GTX 345. We see that in just all kinds of planes. It's a great device. Some pilots have their own home-built one, the Stratix platform. Any of those will be able to give you the pitch and roll, the pitch and bank. But right now, only the Sentry Plus is able to record the G load that would be shown in the track log. So, if you're recording with two devices in the plane, as I sometimes end up doing, I've got multiple devices open, and I don't have the iPad or the iPhone connected to the Sentry, for example. The track log that I recorded for the flight from the iPhone would only have altitude and speed, but the track log recorded via the Sentry will have altitude, speed, pitch, and bank. And so at the end of the flight, when I'm taking a look at the track logs that were recorded from it, once I get back home, I'll usually go through and just swipe delete the track log from the iPhone because it doesn't have as much information as the track log from the iPad that was connected to the Sentry.
Great. Question for CAP pilots here, and specifically, has ForeFlight tabulated Civil Air Patrol search grids? Can I get search grids in ForeFlight?
Oh yeah, that's something that we've had for a while. That's a setting. This should be available to all pilots. It's not limited to CAP pilots. But if you go into settings and turn on search for search, ironically, oh wait, I forgot I need to switch devices. 1 second here. Okay, so if you go into, let me back up there so didn't leave anybody behind. If you go into more in the lower right-hand corner and then settings and go into the filter and you search for search, you'll see the search and rescue features. In order to have access to them, you have to turn that on, and then you can toggle whether you want the waypoints from a search to show up as a named point or a lat long. But if you've got those on, then when you go back to the maps page, on the right-hand side and hit the drop-down on the right-hand side, you'll see there are 3 search options. We've got the cap grid, the cell cap grid, and the GARS grid. So if you toggle that on, it's a little bit hard to see with the sectional, so I'm just going to turn the sectional off. But you'll see we've got the search grid. And as we zoom in, you start to see the subdivisions of each grid, and then you'll see the name of the grid and the quadrant. So we've got the DFW 296, quadrant A, B, C, D. You can change over to the cell grid, which is kind of the numeric one, 33098 DB, A, B, C, D, and so forth. So if you're interested in search and rescue in ForeFlight, we've got actually a guide all about that. So if you go into ForeFlight in the document, go into ForeFlight and go to the search and rescue guide, this is a really comprehensive look at all of the search and rescue features, and it'll guide you through how to set them up, how to use them, how to load a search into the route, and so forth. So it's a great tool to use if you're looking to find out more about the feature.
Yeah, I'd highlight that Documents tab. There's a lot of great information in there. If you haven't checked that out recently, you guys at ForeFlight have put a number of really helpful guides in there. So if you have a question you want to geek out on a little bit, definitely check out Documents there, the ForeFlight section. There's, as you see there, filing, logbook, performance planning. That's a great resource. Josh, we got time for I think one more, and let's end with a good one, which is IFR holds, the bane of our existence as IFR pilots. Sometimes, can I do anything with a hold in ForeFlight? What are the options there?
Yeah, so with this is a Pro Plus and higher feature, so you can now put a hold into ForeFlight, and it's going to put me on the spot to see if this route will do one, but let's find out. So let me turn off the grid there. When you, let's see, there we go. So I got lucky. If we tap on a point there, you can actually do this for other points, but this one, it's got a published hold. So when you tap on the point, you can see in the information in the upper right-hand corner there, we've got hold, 1 published. So we can go in and pick the details. In this case, we can just do the easy button, say set up as published, or if you want to do something different, you can tweak based on that. We'll just choose that and add it to the route. And if we zoom in, we'll see there we've got the hold with some handy arrows showing us which way to go. And if we pulled up the edit view, we've got the little gray oval there that shows which legs and or which direction and the distance on the legs and so forth. So that's, if you're an IFR student, that's probably the kind of thing your CFI is going to say, nope, can't use it. Got to do the calculate in your head rule or write it on paper to figure it out. But when you're actually flying, you're welcome to take advantage of any and all tools to make it a little bit easier. And hopefully this is one of those.
Yeah, that's just about magic for anybody like you and me, Josh, who learned to fly maybe the old way of trying to visualize a holding pattern entry. That one's just about magic. So
No
thanks,
doubt.
Josh, very much. Fantastic hour. Lots and lots of great tips there. Appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this webinar. A reminder that we will have a recording of this webinar up on the Sporty's YouTube channel here in a few hours. So I know there's a lot of info there. That'll be a great chance to go back and review if you missed something. Again, visit sportys.com/webinars to sign up for future webinars. And I will mention again, a team at ForeFlight.com. If you have a question for the team at ForeFlight, they are great. They are pilots. They know their products, so feel free to reach out to them. With that, we're right up to our time. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks to Josh and the team at ForeFlight, and we hope to see you again on another Sporty's webinar.